If you're an entrepreneur, you want to watch this entire video. It talks about the way by which we plan our intentions, and more importantly, what are the things that influence the way we intend to do our work. One of the challenges I've always found is that solopreneurs seem to get stuck and they are unable to progress towards becoming full-fledged entrepreneurs, having scale. However, what I find is that there are some interplay of psychology in this mix. Part of it is about mindset, and the other part is about understanding how this mindset has an impact on you. So I'm going to dive into a few components of this. One of it is known as the theory of planned behavior. But let me cycle back a little bit. Why do I want to take a look at this? Over the last couple of days, I've been having some conversations with entrepreneurs. And one of the challenges that I seem to encounter time and time again is, firstly, should I talk about my plans? And I find that a lot of entrepreneurs who do not like talking about their plans because it might end up in failure. And the kind of failure that they're experiencing can feel debilitating. In fact, I just had a counseling session with one entrepreneur, and it turns out that there are a lot of negative, debilitating thoughts surrounding one particular failure that seems to have been recurrent. And as a result, there's this feeling of wanting to give up. As I take a look at some others, this one entrepreneur has a challenge in selling. And I know a lot of people have got challenges in selling. They don't have salesmanship self-efficacy. So I'm going to dive into the theory of planned behavior, how it relates to self-efficacy, and I'm curious as to how entrepreneurs can be helped in order to elevate their business as well. So let's dive into the theory of planned behavior first. In this diagram, we want to carry out certain kinds of behavior, right? So whatever that kind of behavior is, needs to be set by an intention. And it does seem that there's a strong relationship between intention and behavior. And there are many things that bridge this intention-behavior gap. One of it is self-efficacy. If your intention is clear and you've got a high self-efficacy, your behaviors are likely to show up. However, what influences that intention in the first place? Because intention is the birthplace of your goals. So there are three things in the theory of planned behavior that suggest that your intentions are going to be solidified. The first one is attitude towards the behavior. So for example, if I have a positive attitude towards a certain behavior, I'm more likely to have an intention to carry it out. For example, between two things, coaching people and helping them succeed versus selling, in spite of the fact that both actually are very similar in nature. For example, coaching follows a grow model. You can literally take the grow model and map it into a sales process, which some people call a consultative sales process. The problem is that most people will reject selling as a favored behavior, but favor coaching instead. Part of this could be influenced by another factor, which is the subjective norm. So if you've been brought up in an environment where everybody's a salesperson, it's very unlikely that you'll have aversion towards selling as a behavior. Conversely, if you've always been in a family of educators, they might take a look at coaching as the key, and as a result, you might end up rejecting selling and persuasion. However, what I found is that even in my own personal experience, whenever I reframe my coaching experience as a form of persuasion and influence, I seem to be able to influence my attitude towards that behavior, and therefore my subjective norm is mitigated. Thirdly, it's perceived behavioral control. In other words, do I have any sense of ability to manage and change my behaviors? So a lot of the time, I find that the typical entrepreneur is forced to have to change their perceptions of what they can and cannot control. However, in neuro-linguistic programming, which has been my boon, I've taken it and learned how to change my behaviors. Therefore, my ability to change my behaviors is extremely high. And as a result, it enables me to do these three things in tandem, allowing me to create the intentions and to move towards the behavior that I want. Case in point, my attitude towards video editing initially was really terrible. I didn't like it. I didn't like the tedium. To me, it felt like there were so many steps involved. The subjective norm is I just outsource it. I just hand it over to somebody who will get the job done. However, I also didn't believe that I could actually get somebody to get the job done well. So there was this big conundrum. So eventually, the more I tried to push myself to do it, the more resistance I felt. Until such a point of time where I deep dived into studying the video editing process, lighting, green screen effects, audio effects. All of these things came into the mix, and now I'm more enabled to create the kinds of videos that I truly want. And in fact, it's become a joy for me. So in other words, the more you do something, the more confident you become. That, in self-efficacy theory, is known as mastery experience. With mastery experience, you're going to be able to create perceived behavioral control. More importantly, the better you are at developing those skill sets or improving self-regulation, the more likely you can master even more things. Now, this becomes a virtuous cycle, right? You're going to continue to feel confident about yourself. You're going to want to learn new things. Those new things are going to contribute to your level of confidence, which also helps you to raise the bar every time you do it. So if this is so straightforward, what's missing? It's so apparent, right? Your attitude towards the behavior influences your behavior, so change your attitude. If the subjective norm is the norm, then get out of your subjective norm. Find something else to be the norm. And thirdly, increase your ability to regulate that behavior. Why are these three things so difficult? Well, number one, there is no methodology that teaches people how to change their attitudes. In my opinion, I think attitude change is really about perspective change. Take, for example, the idea of role modeling. A lot of the attitudes that we carry come from the circle that we surround ourselves with. If you're constantly surrounded by people who have a poor attitude towards that behavior, for example, entrepreneurship, and you're hanging around people who keep telling you that entrepreneurship is difficult and so on, the attitude towards that behavior is going to dampen your intentions of wanting to do it, even though you know you can. The fastest way for you to elevate your attitude and to begin by fleshing out the attitude. One of the things that could be helpful would be to sit down and write down what your true attitude is and to verbalize it on a regular basis. Research in self-talk actually tells us that when we do this, it is a strategic intervention. In other words, when you feel like your energy is flagging, you utilize that as a cue to go back to this set of sayings that you have, and you repeat that to yourself on a regular basis, pretty much like chanting a mantra. The second way of doing it is to utilize strategic self-talk to push yourself in order to implement those behaviors. The more resistance you feel, the more you push through. This kind of internal dialogue is likely to help make a difference in terms of the attitude that you carry out. Moreover, the ability for you to change your perceptions comes in the form of enclosed cognition. There's a huge amount of studies that have been done recently about what certain objects do to you. If I put this on, for example, does that help me to increase or change my attitude? Maybe I felt that it was draggy, but when I put on that cap or put on those shades, all of a sudden I become a slightly different person and therefore my attitude changes. What this tells me is that if you shift your perceptual position from one that is coming out through your own lens versus one that's coming out through someone else's lenses, it's as simple as asking yourself, who do I respect who's been able to deal with the situation? Step into their shoes and then say, what would I do if I am them? It allows you to take on a different perspective. And this is a very powerful process that you can use to elevate yourself from old and unhelpful attitudes. In terms of the subjective norm, I believe that there is only one or two things that you can do. And both of them are related to each other anyway. Number one is to change your environment and change your social context. Your social context needs to be surrounding a group of people who are aiming for a higher vision. I've been to mastermind sessions and I've seen entrepreneurs actually elevate their status simply by mixing around other people who push them and goad them on. And I love interacting with these people because they also elevate my way of thinking. Recently, I met somebody who's really young. He's not even in his 20s and he's making in excess of 5 million euros. Now, this is a person whom I truly admire, but what's funny is that he thinks that he's very far away from his actual dreams and his goals. So everybody has their own subjective norm. What happens is if you want to be released from your subjective norm, you need to take a step back. Question your reality a little bit. If your subjective norm on a scale of 1 to 10 is already an 8, sometimes meeting other people might cause you to shift that subjective measure from an 8 to a 4. And all of a sudden, you're now challenged to have to raise the bar even further. And that's the reason why you need to change your environment. Come and join an entrepreneurial group and learn to sharpen each other. The way to sharpen each other is centered around a skill set of conversation. And that's related to this point on subjective norm. If I believed you and everything that you said, I'm of no use to you. But if I learn to challenge the way you think, in spite of your defense against that subjective norm, I become your coach. I become somebody who will cause you to break out into different ways of thinking so that you can challenge yourself. Not many people are geared towards being able to do coaching effectively. However, this is where strong mentors and well-trained coaches come into the picture. and if peers can be trained to ask probing questions. This is going to enable you to change the way you think. This is something that is a staple in the super scaling inner circle. One of the things that I'm training our inner circle members to do is to focus on the ability to challenge their own beliefs and their status quo. This way, they keep stretching beyond their norms, challenge their assumptions, and move forward towards progression of the behaviors that they intended. Finally, perceived behavioral control. From the standpoint of self-efficacy theory, perceived behavioral control is nothing more than the raising of one's capability of emotional regulation. I've talked at length about all of these. I'll briefly mention this. There are 3 things that affect your ability to take action: the way you think, the beliefs that you have, the thoughts that you carry, and so on, which includes your self-talk. Number 2, your physiology, the condition of your body. What you're putting inside of your body does matter, and more importantly, how you change the variables inside of your body. Are you breathing differently? Are you sitting up in an upright posture? Are you smiling a lot more? In order for the hormonal changes to take place and neurochemicals that favor your behavior will be created as a result of getting into congruent physiology that supports those behaviors and those beliefs. At the same time, when you change your thoughts and you change your physiology, you get into an appropriate state. Hopefully, the appropriate state is one that is a solution acting towards your goals. So for example, if you're currently struggling and you don't like the struggle behavior, what if you don't change the struggle behavior, but rather you change the attitude around struggle behavior? What if instead of thinking of struggle as a bad thing, you hang around people who believe that struggle is a great thing and it's a way to sharpen yourself? You use that to shift your subjective norm instead. What if you looked at struggle as a level 4 instead of a level 10? And perceptually, you can change your thinking patterns so that you can make something that looks really tedious to become, it's just another one of those things you have to do during the day. I hope that you can utilize this approach and then raise your capacity. All I can say is that entrepreneurs are a special breed. If you have intentions to become an entrepreneur, you still need to learn many of these skill sets. If you're already an entrepreneur, I urge you to continue to stretch your limits beyond your current imagination. And indeed, imagination creates reality. If you like this video, click the like button, subscribe to this channel so that we can reach out to more people on YouTube. I believe that you, as an entrepreneur, might have even more people you'd like to share this information with. Let's share them, let's grow as a community so that you will have people who can raise your subjective norm, increase your capacity as well, and we all know that iron will sharpen iron. Let's enable people who are suffering in the space of entrepreneurship to raise themselves to a level that transcends that suffering so that they can take more actions to more abundance.